We're presenting on the VNU NV private equity acquisition.
I'm Jordan Ayer.
I'm Alexander Bennett.
I'm Matthew Mangum.
And I'm Matthew Newman. So VNU, or the United Dutch Publishers, was a publishing company founded in the Netherlands. One reason the private equity consortium was so interested in acquiring VNU was due to their products and market share. They had consumer publications, where they had 60% of the market share in the Netherlands. They also published in the UK, France, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. For business publications, they had more than 90 publications throughout Europe and more than 30 publications in the US. For marketing resources, in the US they focused mostly on media, music, marketing, entertainment, restaurant and food industries, and healthcare markets. For telephone directories, this was one of their best company divisions. They offered telephone directories and related products in the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Portugal, Puerto Rico, and South Africa, with well-known brand names like the Golden Pages. They had regional newspapers, where they had 18% of the Dutch regional newspaper market. For the education market, they produced Dutch and French textbooks, magazines, classroom aids, software, and other products. This acquisition consisted over 4 months. In November 2005, shareholders forced VNU to back out of a merger with IMS Health, resulting in Rob Vandenberg, a company executive, stepping down. On December 14, 2005, VNU began to receive acquisition offers. On January 16, 2006, VNU announced they received a proposal from a consortium of private equity firms. On February 7, 2006, VNU announced they will continue to talk with private equity consortium. On March 7, 2006, VNU decided that accepting the offer was in the best interest of their stockholders. On January 25, 2011, after being renamed the Nielsen Company, they issued an IPO that raised $1.8 billion in the largest private equity-backed IPO since 2006. So, the Valcon acquisition, a consortium of private equity investors, bought out VNU. This consortium consisted of Alpinvest Partners, NV, the Blackstone Group, LP, the Carlyle Group, Hellman and Friedman, LLC, Kohlberg, Kravers Roberts & Co., LP, Thomas H. Lee Partners, LP. So financial advisors as well as investment banks that provided funding to the consortium consisted of JP Morgan Chase, ABN AMRO Bank, Deutsche Bank, Citigroup, and ING. VNU also hired Credit Suisse, Evercore Partners, and NM Rothschild & Sons to help them determine a fair stock price. So VNU was interested in selling to this consortium due to the recent conflict between executives and shareholders. VNU had to back out of a merger with IMS, resulting in an executive stepping down. The stock price had recently dropped, and they were developing a turnaround plan. When the offer was made by the private equity consortium, they ended up deciding that accepting the offer was in the best interest of the stockholders. The private equity consortium, in discussing why they were interested in purchasing VNU, they said, we are investing in the future of a company with an unmatched portfolio of market-leading assets, a highly knowledgeable and dedicated employee base, and a sound strategy for the future. We intend to capitalize on these strengths by keeping VNU substantially together as an integrated company and continue to pursue its long-term strategy of improving operational efficiency and investing in product development and innovation. VNU's businesses bring together a unique combination of market intelligence, analysis, advice, and service. We are confident that the company is well positioned to build further on these strengths.
If we look into the mechanics of this transaction, we discover that this was a very heavily leveraged transaction, one of the biggest in the media industry. The aggregate value of the transaction was $10.3 billion, including net indebtedness. When you take a glimpse at an SEC statement about the transaction on behalf of Valcon, we see that Citibank, Deutsche Bank, and JP Morgan Chase, three of the investment banks involved, each offered roughly $117 million each in lending for this transaction. After the transaction, Valcon debt loaded $8.6 billion onto the balance sheet for VNU.
And in 2005, the revenues for VNU were about 3.5 billion euros, and the EBITDA for VNU was about 587 million euros. In this, Valcon purchased all outstanding common shares at 28.75 euros per common shares for a total of 7.6 billion euros. In addition to that, they also purchased 7% of the preferred shares at 13 euros per preferred share for a total of 2 million euros total. The consortium paid a 13.4 times multiplier of the 2005 EBITDA, and they also paid a 23% premium to the July 8th, 2005 closing price, which was huge for shareholders because that was the last trading day prior to VNU's announcement of its planned merger with IMS Health, after which shares dropped. And so this provided the best wealth for the shareholders. The total value of the transaction was 8.6 billion euros, or $10.3 billion, including debt. And of the 7.6 billion euros paid for the common shares, about 40% was equity, which was provided by the 6 private equity firms, and about 60% was debt provided by the 5 investment banks, which goes along with normal LBOs that are normally between 60 to 70% debt loaded.
Next, we're going to take a look at a few of the accounting activities that we can see during the buyout process. The important thing here to notice is that with a leveraged buyout, you're going to want to look at the financials to be able to see what actually occurs after the buyout happens. And so we see what the consortium focuses on according to the financial statements. And we'll start with the assets. We're looking for a couple of things here. You can see that the cash and cash equivalents, the nearly most liquid part of the assets here represented, are going down. That's indicative that there's that what they want to do is improve operational cash flow. They're focusing on their patents and intellectual properties with their non-cash assets, and their goodwill substantially increases. Most notably, the non-cash assets increases at a similar rate to goodwill. Goodwill obviously being the separation between the book value and what somebody actually paid to purchase a company. This increased by a huge amount. Here you can see the total assets increased by more than 52.4% over 3 years, and that represents about 17.4% annual growth. The next thing you'll want to look at when it comes to the accounting activities is what happens here with the liabilities. Now, total equity remained relatively constant during the 3 years represented here, but as you can see, it's standard operating procedure with a leveraged buyout to increase the debt, especially non-current debt. You can see that it goes from about 2 billion to more than 8. And now over 3 years, this is mostly long-term debt that is being reinvested into the company, which matches the growth in assets, whereas they're basically putting their focus on their patents, intellectual properties, and finding ways to improve their operational cash flow and to expand this business. You can also see here in the leveraging timeline that what the consortium wanted to do was decrease leverage by about 0.5 a year. They achieved that goal until around about 2011. You can see that during the time that we'll talk about the IPO here in a moment, but this is a huge decrease in their leverage, more than 50% by the time you hit Q1 of 2011. And this is important because during this time they reduced their debt by about $1 billion, while at the same time doubling EBITDA, with the goal of obviously paying down the debt, increasing margins. And as you can see, this is typical of a leveraged buyout, and that's what the consortium wanted to do here with VNU, now Nielsen.
So where is VNU now? Well, VNU now is known as Nielsen, and in 2011 they initiated an IPO, one of the largest private equity-backed IPOs in history. They offered around 21% of the company for $25 a share. If you'll look to the graph, you'll see a graph of the stock price since their IPO in January of 2011. They've never dipped below their $25 share price, and at one time experienced a high of around $58 in 2015. It was estimated that the private equity firms involved received an annual return of 9.5% since the LBO. The CEO, when he was reflecting upon the LBO back in 2006, stated that he believed this was the greatest thing for their company at the time,